should have a warning about that. Do we?
No.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. I knew it'd show up eventually. It's a little slow like Courtney. Oh, wait, he's here now. I can't talk about him anymore.
I am literally playing leapfrog from meeting to class to meeting to...
Isn't it fun?
Well, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Glad you all are able to be here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Maybe. Okay. So hopefully you found some files and where we're starting today, the PSD file in the files folder. And if you need me to run through that, I can. But this is where we left off last time. And we did have text last time, but I've hidden that layer so that we can work through and put it back on later. But today
and remind me again how I hide that layer, Danny?
Just with the eyeball.
Oh, okay. Just clicking that eyeball thing over there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And I have it grouped in here. So we've got all the text, but I only have Paladiro on right now.
Okay.
So we'll get there. Today we're going to move T-Rex closer to get the donut. We're going to add a little bit of depth of field with some bushes and change out the sky and then add our text back in. So we'll start with T-Rex. And what I'm going to do is drag his layer above the rock. And then the texture is clipped masked into the rock, so we want it above that as well, but not in the clipping mask. And we are going to reveal more of T-Rex. So we're going to click on our mask. And with our erase tool, we're actually going to flip it so that we bring him back into the frame. So I'm just going to erase on top of that so that we see, we can even delete this whole layer if we wanted to, the mask layer. We don't really need it at this point. I want to just bring all of T-Rex back into the frame. Now I will put a mask on because I forgot that we've got this little white area in his teeth that I don't want. So we'll leave that on the mask. Okay, so I'm going to also, with T-Rex, click on that layer, Command T or Control T on a PC. That's going to put this bounding box around T-Rex that I can actually manipulate, make larger, smaller, make them a little smaller. And I'm also going to, while this is clicked, hold down Control or Alt and click, and you're going to see this, this is a right click, you're going to see this window pop up, and we're going to click on Flip Horizontal. I'm just going to get T-Rex in a different position.
Now, Danny, I didn't see a window pop up.
Okay, so it's probably like if you were to just click on T-Rex and you right click, you can't find that menu unless you hit Command or Control T first.
Okay.
It activates the, it's called the transform tool.
No, I mean, I didn't see it on your screen when the screen was sharing.
Okay. So
there it is.
Now? Okay. So I right click and I go down to flip horizontal. So I already flipped him, so I'm going to flip him back. And most of him is back in the frame. It's okay that his foot's cut off. So now that we've got him flipped around, we need to bring his drool layer on top of him, and we can actually, you can either turn it or you can flip it the same way, make it a little bigger. We're just going to change that up but keep it relatively close to his mouth. So now we are going to grab.
So that's a really good reason for labeling our layers, isn't it? So we can find them.
Yes.
And know what they are.
Absolutely. And it also, I need to keep saying save often. So just Command or Control S is save. Just as you're working, Photoshop does crash sometimes, and it is pretty good at recovering the last save you made in your composition, but we just always want to keep making sure that we hit Command Save or Control Save throughout the working progress. Okay, so on the canyon layer, Texas Paladuro canyon layer, which is our background layer, and if you still have layer 0, which is where the very beginning, you can actually remove that layer or leave it there. We're not going to be using that. So I'm just going to make Texas Paladuro my last layer, and I want to duplicate this layer. So what I'm going to do is make sure I've clicked on it, and I'm going to hold the Option key down, and I believe on a PC, is that Alt? And we're going to see that my mouse has 2 arrows when I hold it down. That means we're about to duplicate something. And so to duplicate it, holding Option, click and drag and let go. Now you notice that I've got 2 layers that are ones on top of each other. And I'm going to pull this layer down to shrink it with the Control commands around it. I'm going to make it smaller. I'm actually going to turn it about 45-ish degree angle. And now what we want to do here is give this effect that the tower or the caprock is falling over. So now we want to, just like we started at this very beginning of the first workshop, is with that layer selected, I want to go to our magic wand tool and just click on it to bring up select subject. Oh, man. Okay. Oh, our tolerance is pretty low. Okay, so with this, it may not work now that I've flipped it around. It's gathering way too much, so it's not as good as it was last time when it just selected the tower like it used to. So what I'm going to do is actually back up in my history, or you can do Command Z, and I'm just going to pull the layer over without making it smaller for now. And on this same layer, I'm going to do that same process with the wand select subject. With it larger, Photoshop recognizes the image to find the subject a little easier. So I've got the caprock selected, and now I'm going to click on the mask, add a layer mask, while I've got this layer selected with the marching ants around. And it takes out the background, which is what we want. We just want this canyon. Now I'm going to go in and rotate it, and I'm actually going to make it a little smaller so it looks like it's falling back further away, so it's giving that depth of field already.
Oh, look, the person's hanging onto the rock. Not let it get away.
Yes.
Ah!
So we're going to hide her. All right, so we've got a falling canyon. And now we need to take our particles, which is all grouped together in this
Can you
way.
redo those steps?
Yes. All right. We're going to start with, go ahead and delete this background. Starting with the canyon, the bottom layer, we want to duplicate it. You'll hold down Option or Alt. You get these double arrows. Click and drag. You can drag, you don't have to drag very far. And so that automatically duplicates your layer palette. Now, from here, we're going to click on our magic wand tool, or whatever the 4th tool is. It might be one of these that's showing up. All we want to do is just click that once, come all the way up to this top bar and hit select subject right here. This automatically highlights the subject, which is what we want. From this selection, without clicking anything else, making sure I'm on this layer, I'm going to add a layer mask. That automatically will cut out everything outside of the marching ants. So if I move this layer, now it's just the cap rock. So I'm going to shrink it down. I'm going to rotate it. And to rotate it, you just hover your mouse outside of the bounding box, and it'll give you the crooked arrow. Allows you to turn. We're going to stick it right there. So now we're going to take our particle layer, which includes 3 layers, just the group, and we're going to move it. And we're going to make it smaller as well. We're going to move all of them and put it on top of the cap rock so that the particles and everything fall with it. And if you go to the files folder, if you were able to download week 3, there's 2 more brushes in here: Explosion, Photoshop brushes, and Free Smoke. So we're going to just double click those. They will automatically load into Photoshop. And how we find those is from our brush setting tool. And if you don't see this over here, if you go to Window at the top, click on Brush Setting, it shows, it'll populate it over here. And I'm going to add a new layer. And what this will do is, if I will come over here and grab the paintbrush, we're going to actually paint with the new brushes we loaded. But we want to make sure we're on a new layer, that we've got the paintbrush selected. And now our brush setting has been activated. And with the brush window, and you scroll down to the very bottom, it shows you the 2 brushes we just downloaded or loaded into Photoshop. So with the brush setting, we're going to look for the explosion brush. Now I have a lot of brushes through here, but when you have a new brush, it will be easy to recognize. So this brush right here, and I'm going to make it a little smaller. I'm going to pull it up so we see the outline in the dark gray area on my screen. This is what this is going to look like. And if you want to rotate, you can use this angle right here, and we'll say 90 degrees, shows you that it's 90-degree angle, 45, or you can just simply, let's see the key commands. Earlier I was doing it. It's not wanting to do it anymore, but I thought you could just shift and push the arrows to the side. Let's see if I click on it. Maybe it'll work. Nope. Okay. Well, we're just going to go with 45-degree angle because it aligns up with our cap rock. So all I'm going to do, I've got my paintbrush setting over here. I've got my brush and I'm on a new layer. All I'm going to do is just click, and it makes, right now my opacity on my brush was at 60. So if I just do Command Z, which is backing up, and move that opacity up to 100, because we want it to be its full color, we see that now we've got kind of dirt exploding through as well. And we're going to drag this layer. We can either put it under the particle group, or we can leave it on top. And if we wanted a different color, since we've already put this on our layer, we can come down to this FX, and we're going to do color overlay. And when you see blend mode as normal, that means it's a full opacity of the color. So we want that in this case, but here in a little bit, we're going to change that. So that's just something to keep in mind. We want the full color to show up. Now, if we are not sure which color, if we just drag our mouse onto our artboard, the eyedropper tool automatically shows up. And so you can click anywhere in your composition and it will grab the colors of whatever your eyedropper's on. So in this case, I want to get something that's relatively close to the brown in the cap rock. So it looks like this portion of the layer is actually exploding. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. And if we want to have another explosion, but we've got this sharp line, what we can do, to do Command Z and undo that, is in our brush setting palette, we've got this flip X and Y. Those are the axis of an up and down or across. So if I hit flip on my Y axis, it's going to take it and flip it completely opposite. And I'm going to make my brush a little smaller so it's not exactly the same, and just make an explosion on that side. And you've got a few different brushes that come inside of, I'll just show you a few. It just gives you different types of brushes. So you can choose whichever one if you want to choose one of those. I just chose one that had a little sharper arrows as if it was coming out of the middle. And then I'm going to make another layer just so I have, and we'll go ahead and name this layer Explosion. And I'm going to name this one Smoke. So in the smoke layer, we've already got our free smoke Photoshop brushes. Wanted to see what those look like. You've got a visual here. So in your brush setting, I'm going to look for those, and they're right under my explosion brush right here. So I'm just going to click on one of them just to try it out. And I can go ahead and change the color before I even paint. That way I don't have to go in and do the steps of last time where we hit the FX and color overlay. This time, starting on the smoke layer before I've even clicked anywhere, I'm going to actually change the color. So I just go over here to my swatch, I click it, and automatically the eyedropper pulls up again. This time I'm going to grab a little bit a lighter color, and I'm going to make up my brush bigger. I'm going to click. Now we see a huge ball of smoke. And again, if we don't want it that big, we can click on our layer where the control panels pop up and simply drag that down. Now with this, the brush was on the edge, so when we pulled it down, now it's got that really hard edge. So I'm going to do Command Undo, and I'm actually going to start over. So I did Command Z again, or you can just delete that layer. If you don't like what you've done, you can use the history palette to go back in time, or you can simply just do Command or Control Z to undo. So now we've got the smoke layer, and we took everything away, so it's basically starting over. We click on our paintbrush tool. We make sure we've got the brush that we want to use. I'll use the same one. I'm just going to make it a little smaller. And I'm just going to click. And then I want to rotate it a little bit and click again. So now I've got some smoke, and I've got an explosion, and the tower's falling. And you can rearrange your layers where you can see the smoke behind everything, or you can even change the opacity to where you can see through it a little more. Now I did that earlier with my brush when it was at 60. So if just to show you, I'll create a new layer. I'll delete this layer, so I'm not going to name it right now. It's just layer 1. I've got this brush. I'm going to do smoke, and it already has some see-through because it's a smoke brush. But if I change the opacity up here on the top toolbar, we'll take it down to 40%, 41, and I click again, you can see that there's a little bit of it, but it's just not painting as hard. So 2 ways we could do that. You could start that way, or you could start full like this one with the opacity that was at 100. And then on this layer, as you click on it, right up here in the layers palette next to the word normal, you've got opacity and fill. And on the opacity, it's just the same, but the same thing that we did with the brush, but now we're doing it to the whole layer. And this gives you the option to always bring it back. Whereas if I would have started with a brush with low opacity up here, all I can do with this layer is make it, well, it's on the same layer. So I have this brush here, and I've changed to opacity of 70. Then, I wonder why it's not letting me paint. Sometimes this Photoshop. Okay, sorry about all that. Again, opacity is low, and if I start with that, all I can do is make it lower. I can't make it any stronger or fuller, if you will.
Gotcha.
So, rule of thumb, I guess in this situation, is just to start with a full opacity so that you can manipulate it later without losing it or having to start over. So I'm gonna
smoke signals coming up from the valley down there.
I'm gonna go ahead and delete those 2 layers. And here we've got some weird smoke, and now the explosion looks really weird. So I have my smoke layer, and I am going to change the opacity on the layer so that it gives it a little bit of some smoke, but not too much. And you can see under the rock right here, under his feet by the cherry donut, you can see how that smoke is showing up there. And that's just because we are under that rock. We can pull our smoke layer up, we can be on top of it, but we want to make sure that we are not under our last layer because we want to be able to see it. But I also want it on top of my cat rock. Now I can add a clipping mask and go in with an erase tool. I just got a smooth edge brush, and I can take away whatever parts I don't want of the smoke.
So it's the same masking technique as you were using before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or I can flip my black and white foreground background to add back the smoke. So I can take
I think what's happening here is that explosion has turned the cap rock into sprinkles, and those sprinkles are going to end up on top of the donut.
Sure. But there's a line inside of the explosion that I'd like to get rid of. So I'm going to add another mask on top of this explosion with the erase tool, and I'm going to make sure I'm deleting. I'm just going to go in here and erase part of that. So you still see the hole, but you don't have that hard edge. Just gives it a little bit of a fill.
I love it.
All right. So we've got Caprock falling, exploding. T-Rex is getting closer to the donut, but we want to make it even harder for him. So in our files folder, you'll notice sage bushes. Great. So what I'm going to do here is just drag this file in here, and I'm just going to hit return. I don't need it to cover the entire artboard because I really just want a portion of it. I'm going to move this layer all the way by just dragging it all the way to the front, so I can see which parts of the sagebrush or bushes I'm going to use. So in this case, I just want to use a section right here to give it little depth of field, because I'm going to add the bush in front of the donut and a little bit on his foot. So I've got this layer right here, and now it does matter which selection tool I choose. So I'm on the 4th tool, and I'm going to hold my mouse down so that it populates more options. I'm looking for the object selection tool. What this does is I can select a portion that I want to use, and it does a sort of good job about selecting just that area. So if I hold down Shift, you see, I don't know if you can see on my screen, but there's a plus sign that populates. Yeah,
there's a little plus in there. I see that.
So if I hold Shift down and I drag on the parts that I want to add, it'll add those.
Could
And if
add
I
selection.
accidentally added something I didn't want, instead of Shift, you can hold Option or Alt and just hover over those with your Alt key, and it'll take it away. So now we've got the section of the image that we want. So on the sagebrush layer, I'm just simply going to click on an Add Layer Mask, and it'll mask out all of the rest of it. I'm going to make this a little smaller and just stick it right on the edge so that the bush looks like it's in front of the rock. And then I'm going to hold Option, which is the duplication, click and drag. I'm going to hit Command or Control T, and then I'm going to hit Control or Alt, right click. This is where we can flip horizontally just to get a different, we can use the same image and different parts of it, and it looks like we're adding back some of the sage without having to do that. We've already got clean edges, and we don't have to worry about the whole screen covering it. So this is just to show, this is an upfront depth of field. You've got these bushes, and then you've got this donut, then you've got this dinosaur coming through, and then this background we're going to give it a little more depth to it.
Would you mind going over that again?
Sure. How far back? Just adding the brush in?
Like, how did you select it?
Okay. So I just pulled the sagebrush layer in, and I'm going to drag this layer all the way to the top so I can see just this layer. So on the selection tool, which is the fourth toolbar on your left toolbar, I'm going to hold down I'm just going to click and hold, and it's going to populate 3 other options: Magic Wand, Quick Selection, and Object Selection tool. And so I just want a portion of this, and with the subject selection that we typically do, it doesn't work when things are patterned, meaning if I click on it, it's like I don't know what the most prominent object is, so I can't really help you here. So we have to kind of do our own job by going to the fourth tool and clicking on Object Select Tool. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to drag over the section that I want. I just want these 2 bushes right here. And you see it got part of this top area, but it didn't get the part down here. So if I hold down Shift, there's a plus sign. And I'm going to drag over the part that I want to add. So now the marching ants have added this bottom bush, but I don't want this little section up here. So I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, and I'm going to drag over those parts. It doesn't get it perfect.
And those two little those shortcuts, the Shift and the alternate or Option, they work on all the selection tools. So if you want to take away or add, it works on every one of the selection tools.
Yes. Okay, so we've got this selection, marching ants around just the portion of the bush that I would like. So now I'm going to come over here on my layers palette with this layer and select clipping or just select the layer mask. What that does is it takes out everything that wasn't inside of that selection. It erases it. It's still here in our mask, but we've just masked out everything that we don't want. So I'm going to pull this down and put it on this front rock, and I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to hold down Option and drag. I'm going to make that a little smaller, adding more bushes, and I'm also going to right click and flip it just so that it's not exactly the same bush everywhere, and just drag it again. So now we've got some bushes on top of the rock in front of T-Rex's foot, but we need his foot to not look like it's just hanging out in the air. We want to crush this rock our main rock that we put in a long time ago, because he's coming around this rock to get the donut. So we want to crush this rock too. We want to give it that look and feel. So what we're going to do first is delete part of the rock, and then we're going to add a new layer to add the particles back, but in a different place. Just like if something exploded, you have to take it away, and then those pieces end up elsewhere. So on the rock layer, we're going to add a mask. In the mask, we're going to come over here and find our eraser tool. And then we're going to come over to the right side and find our brushes. And the few, let's see, it might have just been last week, we downloaded a particle brush, which I will find here in a second. Okay, it's all of these little brushes, and it's very hard to see. But this is what they look like. All the particles that we made in the cap rock. We're going to select that same brush. We're going to erase on our rock tool over here. We're just going to simply erase just a little bit of it. And then now we're going to add another layer. And it automatically, when we're selecting the rock and we say add a layer, it's going to put it right above it. Well, you can see that this is inside of a clipping mask, and we don't want that. We're going to drag this layer even above T-Rex for now, just to pull it out of the clipping mask. I'm going to drag it right below it again, T-Rex. And this time, instead of erasing, I'm going to come over to my left toolbar, and I'm going to click on the paintbrush. With the paintbrush selected, I'm going to hit Option so that I can, while it's selected, all I do is hit Option and click on part of the rock. What this does is populates the color of the rock right here. And as you can see, this swatch, if I click on the sky, it turns blue. If I click on the holding Option down, click on the rock, it gets the rock color. So we know that we're about to paint with this color, and I want to make sure that my brush is not the smoke brush. So I go into my brush settings, and I'm going to click on the particle brush. It doesn't have to be the exact same, because there are a few options. And this time I'm just going to paint in the particle as if it's blowing out the sides and even the top. And there's still a part of me that wants another layer, so we're going to say tan rock particles. You can name your layers, whatever helps you. And we're going to name this one brown rock particles. And so I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm going to just grab a darker brown and make my brush a little smaller and just click that again, as if there's just some mess to the rock. And we can go crazy with this, but not. I'm just reiterating some of the steps there of the rock just being crushed. Okay, so we've got the bushes in front of T-Rex up here. We want to make sure that those stay on the top, because this is, I'm going to group these layers with them all selected, Command G. I'm going to name this bushes. We want to make sure that this is always on top, because if we start dragging this layer behind things, it's just going to start looking weird. And the main point of the bush at the top is it's in our foreground. And we can still use, with it all selected in the group, we can move this whole group around, make it larger or smaller. All right, so now we've got something fun to do also is I'm going to pull one of these bushes out of the bush, and that's just Option because it's duplicating, and I'm dragging the layer out. Now it looks the same here because I did this on the layer palette versus dragging it on my artboard. But really, I just have this freestanding bush. And I am going to put some of this in his mouth, as if he's working his way through the bushes to get to the donut. On my clipping mask, I'm going to make sure I'm on that, and I'm going to hit my erase tool because I'm going to erase more of the bush. I can use my particle brush, a little weird. I can go in and I can use a smooth default brush, which is just smooth edges, sort of. You can just play around with new brushes and how they work. That's the main thing, is to just try different brushes. What kind of texture can you give them? I don't know. You can just have a lot of fun with brushes. So now we've got some of the bush inside of T-Rex's mouth as if he's eating that, trying to find the donut. A little bit here and there. You don't have to do that. It's just I always like to put that on top, but you can still drag it where it's at least above T-Rex. It doesn't have to be in your foreground anymore. So we can just name this bush and T-Rex. Okay, so now we've got kind of a crazy image going on, and the really fun part is we're gonna pull in the lightning sky. So this is one image that is inside of the files. Just gonna pull and drag, and I want to make this fairly large. So you can see that my artboard, if I zoom out, this image is actually over what it needs to be, as far as it's not exactly to the borders, and that's totally fine. I'm gonna hit enter, zoom back in. All right, so we see that when we pulled this layer in, where it's at over in our layer palettes at the very top. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift Command left bracket or right bracket on your keyboard, which is next to the P key. Or you can just simply drag like we've been dragging. We just want this all the way almost to the last layer. So we've got our canyon is in the very, very bottom layer with a lightning sky right above it. So I'm going to hide this layer for just a minute, the lightning layer. So I'm just going to click the eyeball. And on top of the Paladuro Canyon, now we can do our selection tool again. So we're going to find the fourth tool, click it, and we're going to do subject select at the top. Actually, we're not going to do that. Sorry. We're going to click selection, but we're going to hold down and we're going to click quick selection. Because we know if we do that subject select, it's going to get the cap rock. We don't want the cap rock this time. We're focusing on the bottom third. So all of the land that is in the Paladuro Canyon, we can do either the land or the sky. But I just am going to take the object selection, and all
Just
I'm
basically painting over the top of the bottom third.
Yes, I'm just dragging my mouse and clicking it, and it's taking all these marching ants, and it's just as if, like Steve said, you're just painting over it. Well, we're just selecting it. So we're on the canyon, we've selected just that bottom third, and what I'm going to do is click on the lightning sky. I'm going to go ahead and reveal it with the eyeball, and then I'm going to hit add layer mask. So it's masking out the sky. Well, really we want the reverse of this. So with our mask selected, we're just going to hit Command or Control I, which is invert. So we've inverted our mask. So now we have a purple sky, and you can go into the mask with your erase tool. And I just like to use the default sometimes when I'm cleaning things up. So this is basically a very smooth brush. And you can go in and delete by your steady hand the bottom, or you can add back stuff. So again, adding and deleting. If you want to add, you've got to put the black on. If you want to delete, you've got to have the white. So I'm just going to clean up a little bit of that, and you can still see the sky, but what I can do is if I want to move this sky around, I don't want the mask going with it. I want to be able to move it without the mask area coming with it. So this link in between this lightning sky and the mask, if you just click on that link, it'll unlink it. So right now we've got these brackets around the mask. That's what's selected. We want to make sure we click on the lightning. You can see with the brackets. Now I can move this around without it taking the mask. And I'm going to Command T so that I can get the control transform. And I'm going to do hold down Control and right click. And we're going to flip it horizontally. I'm going to bring in the coolest part so we can actually see the lightning. And put it about there. Hit return. And if you want your mask to fall a little bit, again, just make sure that you have it unlinked. A good rule of thumb is to link it back after you've made all of your changes where you want them, so that if you were to ever move your layers around or drag them into another document, then now it goes together, because you don't want to leave your mask behind. All right, so now we've got this purple sky, and I'm going to change the sky color to blue. So inside of its layer palette, we click on this FX again. Go back to our color overlay. This is where this blend mode that says normal right now is very important to change. When we're adding and painting, a lot of times what we've done so far is particle painting and brushes. And we wanted those to be full opacity, basically, full color. We didn't want any kind of weird filter going on. And so we left it at normal. Well, now we want to change this. We're in color overlay. We want to just change the sky. You can play with these and see the difference of what they do. But we're going to really focus on color right now. So it's taking everything that was purple, every shade of purple, and right now we have brown, but I'm going to change this to an ever so subtle deep blue, where it's almost just like, I don't know if it wants to be black or blue. So this color right here is taking everything that's in the sky that was purple and making it this new dark blue. And that's because we've hit color. Now, if we left it on normal, our sky would be pitch black. So we want to make sure that we have color selected so that it just changes the color in the sky. And so now we've got this blue particle from the bright sky that we used to have. And what's great about being able to go back in our layers, we find the blue particle layer, and now we can do the FX color overlay that we just did for the sky, but this time we want it to go back to normal, so it's full opacity. And then if we just click on the color, our eyedropper, if we drag it onto our artboard, will automatically populate. You can just click on whatever part of the sky color that you want to reveal, as if it's showing through the rocks. So since it's a little lighter of a sky here, I'm just going to leave it on that color. And again, if you've created things that you don't like the color anymore, such as these particles, you can go in and change those to be something that's a totally different color now that our composition is changing. And again, we can change the opacity on our smoke. We can change the color just by tweaking opacity in our layer palette. So now we've got this very dramatic sky in a very bright land. So here we're going to actually colorize, and how we can do that. So let's close or uncollapse our layers. Make sure where we are in the layer, when we add this right here, the circle with the half line in it, half full, half not, is an adjustment layer, and it pulls up a lot of different options. Today we're just going to focus on the curves. So if I click curves, I've put the properties right here. If you click on it, it'll automatically open. But properties you can also find in Windows by clicking properties here for it to show up. This is how you manipulate the curve. So the curve is taking our entire image and it's using the RGB, which is all the 3 colors that make up all the screen colors, and it's ever so slightly, if you move this curve line by just holding your mouse down and taking it, you see how it affects your entire image. That if the curved layer was on top of everything at the very top, it would then change the whole composition. Or if we drag it below T-Rex, changes everything below him. So we just want to give it a little more dramatic feel, with him still a little bit brighter because he's in the foreground and there's a spotlight on him. So we're going to leave
add the curve layer.
I'm sorry?
How did you add the layer for the curves?
Okay, I'll do that again. So I'm going to just go ahead and delete this layer. All right, so I want to get the curve skin. So I'm just gonna, it doesn't really matter where your layer palette is right now, because you can easily move the curve layer. But if you click on this circle at the bottom of your layers palette, which is an adjustment layer, it's a half circle with fill and no fill, you're gonna click on curves. It populates that window and curves pops up. So you've got your properties, which shows the curve like palette where you can manipulate the curve. So all I'm going to do is just drag ever so slightly. You can actually take parts of it, make an S. This is just something that you don't have to move a whole lot at all for it to drastically change things in your whole composition. But because if you do grab it and you take it, it starts looking really, really nasty. So we like to ever so slightly give it a little drama and manipulate our artboard, but not too much, because a little bit does a lot in this situation. So I'm actually going to reset that. This is the reset button. Once you make a move, it'll activate it. So if you hit it, you can kind of start over. This is a clipping mask icon. So if we wanted the curve to just be over T-Rex and not affect anything else, I've made a drastic change. I click on this icon that's our clipping mask. Everything went back except T-Rex. Now T-Rex is the only thing that's going to change inside of the curve. So you can change the colors and drastically see the difference there. So I'm going to reset it. Still clipped here. This is what the clipping mask is the little arrow that's saying this, whatever's happening above is only going inside of that layer. So we're going to take off the clipping mask. You can hold Option to take it off, or you can hit this icon again and it'll take it off, and then you can drag wherever you want this curve to go after you've changed something. So we're just going to change it a little bit. We're not going to not do much. So here I can see on the right side, or the left side, I'm sorry, I've got this black line, and it's part of my mask that from the lightning that wasn't pushed over much. So we're just going to click on the mask. We're going to hit the erase tool. And I just have a normal brush, and I'm just going to get rid of that. But something that we can also do is add a new layer above the lightning. And we're going to use our paintbrush, or our paint bucket, excuse me. And we're going to change this color just to be black. And I'm just going to paint this entire layer. Now on this layer, I'm going to take the opacity down to just about maybe 30, 33, just whatever your heart desires, really. We're going to hit a clipping mask, and I'm going to get the erase tool. I'm going to make my eraser fairly large. And when I erase it, it erases that black. Well, the black is, since the opacity is pretty low, it's hard to tell. So I'm going to pull it all the way up. It's just like same things that we've been doing. But this time, with the opacity pretty low, I'm going to bring back portions of the canvas that I want to not be so dark. And then I'm going to actually paint. There we go. Bring back some of these that are fairly close, and then go ahead and take back the other parts black. You can also use your opacity brush up here to change as you erase how much it erases, how hard it erases to some degree. Again, you can move this black layer. This is just to give some background without really, you have just more control when you have this layer to be able to add things back or delete things in the color. But make sure, as you can just see, I was on this black layer and I erased. So over here you see this hole. Well, you can't get that back. You got to make sure that you're on your mask. So I'm just gonna Command Z to undo. Make sure I'm on my mask before I start manipulating things. I know there's not a lot that looks like is happening. We're just going to give it some depth, and we're going to actually black out more of this area right here. You can drag this layer. Again, it's linked to a mask, so wherever you drag and whatever you've erased will go with it. All right, so let's say that we wanted, I'm going to run through this just real fast. With our Unsplash, I've given you 3 different resources in a few places for images. Unsplash, Creative Commons, and Pixabay. These are all links, so if you just come in here and click on those. What Unsplash is free photos that you can use, and they're really, really great photos. So if you wanted a different sky, you can search for lightning. We want to download that. So now it's in my download folder. Open up Photoshop. Pull in this sky. So you can find different backgrounds to use. Looks like he's on an island now. You can even use the same mask. So if I have Option, if I hold down Option and I click on this mask, I'm going to drag. You see the 2 double arrows. It's going to give the same mask. We don't want this layer anymore, but we want this one. So now we have a different lightning show going on, and we used our same mask that we had earlier. It's just if you put something in and you don't like it and you want to go back and change something again or find a new image, but you don't want to go through all the steps of creating a new mask or basically the same, you can easily use what you already have by just holding Option and clicking on top of the mask and dragging it to another layer. So it's putting this mask on that layer, which we don't want. But now we don't have the purple background anymore. We've got this new layer. So that's how you would go find, and these 3 image sources I have are public domain. They're free to use. We're not having any copyright issues, and that's a big deal whenever you're pulling in images, especially from online. You want to make sure that your sources are copyright free. But there's so many options in Unsplash. Just have fun looking for images. Okay, so we've got T-Rex in here, still needing to get that donut, but we need to bring our text back in. So what I'm going to do is click on my text layer, and this was saved from last week because we did this at the very end. And I'm going to open up, and I made a TV series. Well, it's black, it's very hard to read. Something you can do if you've got a lot of text layers that are already grouped is to go to FX, Color Overlay, make sure you're on normal, This is how you can change all of the text at one time. Color. So we want it white. This is why the black background is important, to just subdue everything so that your eye doesn't have a hard time figuring out what to focus on. We want accessibility to be a must in this. So we want the text to be very well, like, easy to read without it competing with the background too much. So then we can play with this layers opacity, dragging it to the side, up and down, just to see where the text is legible, but we still get our background. We haven't lost much. And again, if we feel like T-Rex needs to be involved with being a little darker, just dragging that layer up. And you can come in and erase with a lower opacity paintbrush. We're on the mask. We need to make sure we're erasing so that we can just kind of allow him to not be so subdued, but not fighting with the text either. And the same thing, we've pulled this layer on top of our text, which we want to keep it below the text. And sometimes it gets tricky when other layers are on top of the text and the background and all of, for instance, T-Rex, the drool, we've got this layer with the curves. And when you start moving your layers up and down, it gets really, you start losing your depth of field. So I'm going to group these layers. These are my 2 rock particle layers, just so I can start to see what needs to stay together and where that needs to be. So we know where that is. The drama of the curves, T-Rex, we can pull below. We've got our rock. So I'm going to group those layers, call it rock. We've got our text layer. We've got our first particle layer. We know that the background layers, so I'm going to Shift Select Command G to group those. So now our layer palette is getting a little less overwhelming. We know that the drool and T-Rex have got to stay together. So I'm going to group that. I'm just going to call this T-Rex. And then we've got some more particles and smoke that if we group those together, you don't see on your artboard anything changing. So you know that when you group that together, it's still okay. I'm going to call this Cap Rock Explosion. All right, so now we just have this black background. Doesn't need to be grouped with anything. It can, on the below, it can be grouped with these, and it doesn't affect your composition. If I group it with those, it doesn't affect. So this one just can kind of hang out. You can pull it, figure out where you want to manipulate the darker background. So this just cleans up our layer palette just a bit and helps us know whenever we add new texture, new text, new filters in here, that we know where our layers are, where they're going to affect different places, if that makes sense. Just like if I was doing, as you can see, it drops inside here. You can even move it around, pull it out of your group. It matters where your layers are and what kind of filters you have on those layers. Currently we haven't played with the blending mode filters, but this is a lot like what we were just in our, when we opened up this color overlay. These filters right here are the same as the filter here. It just depends on, it's filtering out a layer versus, it depends on what layer you have chosen here. So we've got our black layer. If I go in here and I just run through these, I'm just hovering over and it's changing. You can see what different filters do to that layer. And then that will depend as you drag it where and what changes inside of that filter. You can also hold down Shift and the minus sign. You notice right here, my filters, when I hold Shift and minus, they change without having to click and drag. It's just a shortcut. So again, just playing around with that, seeing where and what changes in your whole composition. How can you make it better, worse? It just allows you to have a lot more fun. And even if in Unsplash, I'm just going to show this real fast before we go. I'm just going to pull in texture. And there's always fun texture, but this one maybe will be easy. Just download it again, open my Photoshop, pull in my texture. Now I'm going to rotate it and make it oversized. I'm going to pull this layer all the way to the top. I'm going to hit Shift and minus, and you're just going to see how that layer can manipulate your entire piece. And we may not want flying swoosh lines. Color matters and the texture, but you can just do all kinds of fun stuff when it comes to the top layer and filters. Again, play with your masks, reveal, unreveal, things below. I don't know, just have fun with it. But for now, delete that. And I'm going to save, but I'm also going to bring back a little bit of the background. Actually, just pull it under there. All right, so this is kind of where we end for today because it's over. And I know it was a lot of back and forth and a lot of different things happening. But what I'm hoping for you to try and practice with is your assignment is to be able to move objects around in your composition or the one that you are working on. Maybe it's this one. And adding the new brushes and playing around with different brushes and elements. Adding a depth of field, which you can blur and unblur. You can put things a lot closer. And like we did, we shrunk down the cap rock now that it's falling further away. And maybe add a new sky to your composition. So I know that we are over time, so I want to not go over too much, but
you did great, Danny. This is wonderful.
Okay, well, I hope I didn't lose y'all on that one. We've got it recorded, and whatever questions I will try to answer if you have time to stick around. Liquify tool. Okay. PC, real fast. PC option is Alt, right, Steve?
Right. Yeah,
Option
I put that. I
Oh.
answered that question over in the chat window.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you did. Okay. So liquify. Let's see here. Let me click on. Let's get our background.
Now be
Our
careful
light.
with liquify because if you do it to a person, you can make an enemy very fast.
So under the filter top bar, we're going to click liquify. It'll open up a whole nother window. And here there's so many options that you can use, play with. But in short, if I just drag my mouse, it's just going to liquefy, and almost like if we mixed paint. If this was water we put on, we damaged it with water. If you've got people, this is really a nice, like T-Rex isn't probably going to work with the face, but if you pull in like a photograph, you can really help this whole area with the face awareness liquefy. A lot of magazines will use this to just soften their skin, make them skinnier, and the eyes and nose. I haven't played a whole lot with Liquify, but Steve, if I know you have a lot more.
Yeah, I use Liquify a lot to, like on a portrait, maybe you want to touch up the hair a little bit. Maybe it's sticking out real big on one side and you want to kind of tuck it down just a little bit. Or maybe there's a shoulder that's too high and you want to push that shoulder down a little bit. So you can actually, you have to be very careful with it. But if you work slowly with it and make small changes, Liquify is a very powerful tool.
Yes, small changes for sure. A lot like that curve tool. It doesn't take much
Yes.
editing.
Yes.
But all right. Well, are there any other questions? Where did y'all go? There you are. Oh no. Okay. Well, we'll get this recording posted shortly, and hopefully that will be helpful to just kind of slow it down, because I know I talk fast and I just zoom, but I'm trying to slow down.
You're doing great, Danny.
There's just so much to Photoshop, but
Yeah.
I'm going to put a few more resources in our team site. Again, I'll just kind of show y'all in the, I believe, resource link channel. If you go up to files, there's a Word document in there that has the brushes to download. It's got the images that I was just showing you. There's multiple out there, but these 3 we know are copyright free. And then there's a Photoshop tutorial. Oh man, it was a very cool training that Steve shared with me on YouTube. And this guy can explain things a lot better than I can. But just all the tricks that you just really don't know are in Photoshop. I learned a lot. And so I just want to share that with y'all. And I'll put it right in there. But it'll help with some of the things that we're doing, different ways to go about changing the sky and creating different types and parts inside the images, just with different key commands or different ways of doing it, because we always have different ways to do things. So it might be more helpful. But okay, well, I will let you have your weekend.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Danny. You did
Thank
great.
you so much for being here. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Just wait and see if there's any other questions. Steve, you probably could have chimed in more. I should have let you with the sky. You're really good at that.
Oh, I enjoyed listening. You are doing so good. So good. I'm proud of you, my friend.
Thanks.
You're outstanding. Doing a good
Okay.
job. Good job.
All right. Thanks for recording it and helping with
Oh, yeah, I guess I better stop the recording, huh? So it
Yeah,
doesn't,
let's do that.
let's see. Oh, I didn't start it. Yes, I did.
No, you did. I see it this time.